Meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, wir sind in einer bislang noch kleinen Runde und ich frage jetzt erstmal, ob ich gut zu verstehen bin, überall dank Zoom. Ich begrüße unsere bislang 3 Teilnehmer. Eike Eimers, herzlich willkommen, liebe Kyra und Frau Dr. Carla Witsch. Wir sind hier um 10 Uhr Ortszeit und glaube 4 Uhr Ortszeit in Chicago mit einem sogenannten Industrieworkshop, der aber bitte schön nicht aufs falsche Gleis geleiten darf. Das Besondere an diesem Workshop, den wir hier haben, besteht darin, dass wir alle, wie wir hier sind, ja, Patientensicherheit vorantreiben möchten. Und das Schöne ist, dass es Möglichkeiten gibt, dieses tatsächlich im Konkreten auch zu tun. Vielleicht zu meiner Person soweit nicht bekannt. Ich bin seit über 30 Jahren mittlerweile in der Standes- und Gesundheitspolitik, wohin es mich wegen Patientensicherheit hineinverschlagen hat, ursprünglich als Chirurg, dann als langjähriger Präsident der Ärztekammer Berlin, und auch nach meinem Ausscheiden aus dem Amt bin ich nach wie vor mit Nachdruck auf nationaler, auch auf internationaler Ebene unterwegs, einen Beitrag zu leisten, dass die Arbeitsbedingungen in der Patientenversorgung so sind, dass nicht nur Patienten keine Schaden nehmen, sondern dass die Arbeitszufriedenheit und die Zusammenarbeit für alle deutlich besser ist als das, was wir momentan derzeit erleben. Ich habe mich sehr gefreut, vor einigen Monaten RLDatix kennengelernt zu haben. RLDatix ist eine Firma, die in den Vereinigten Staaten, aber auch im Vereinigten Königreich basiert ist und die seit über 20 Jahren ein Verfahren anbieten, das für Deutschland Neuland darstellen würde. Dieses Verfahren nennt sich abgekürzt CANDOR. Tim McDonald wird es gleich entsprechend vorstellen. Es geht letztendlich darum, dass die Patientenversorgung nur dann sicher und erfolgreich sein kann, wenn die Bedingungen für die Gesundheitsberufe, die die Patienten konkret versorgen, auch ausreichend gut sind. Care for Caregivers ist da eines der Stichworte. Das ist einer der Momente, die in der deutschen Gesundheitspolitik derzeit noch ein bisschen fehlt. Wir geben 3 Milliarden Euro aus für Digitalisierung, aber 0 Milliarden Euro aus für Humanisierung. In der Beziehung können wir durchaus von den Vereinigten Staaten etwas lernen, und das soll auch das Ziel und der Anlass des heutigen Workshops sein. Wir können uns informieren, wie es gelingt oder gelingen kann, nicht nur von Patientensicherheit zu reden, sondern welche Maßnahmen, welche Verfahren wie getroffen werden, dass tatsächlich auf systematischer Ebene Patientensicherheit realisiert wird. Dass die amerikanischen Lösungen nicht einfach 1:1 auf Deutschland zu übertragen sind, ist vergleichsweise naheliegend. Genauso wenig, wie Sie ein Auto, das in England für den englischen Markt produziert wurde, einfach auf eine deutsche Straße stellen können. Und auch hierin liegt die Einladung, gerade gegenüber Ihnen als Fachleuten zu gucken, auf welchem Wege man die Kernelemente entsprechend so übersetzen kann, dass auch in Deutschland insgesamt für alle was Besseres dabei rauskommt. Die netten Nebeneffekte, die mit CANDOR und dem Zugang der Verfahrensweise von RLDatix verbunden sind, besteht auch darin, dass insgesamt durch Schulung der Mitarbeiter die Zusammenarbeit über die Berufsgruppen hinweg deutlich besser wird. Es steigt die Berufszufriedenheit, es sinken die Krankenstände, es verlängert sich die Verweildauer im Beruf. Also alles Nebeneffekte im Zusammenhang mit der systematischen Einführung von Patientensicherheit, indem man die Gesundheitsberufe adressiert, die gerade in der jetzigen Zeit in höchstem Maße willkommen sind. Und jetzt würde ich umswitchen ein bisschen auf Englisch. Wir werden es da freundlich, elegant durchwursteln, und ich freue mich, euch hier Tim McDonald vorstellen zu können. Tim ist Arzt und Rechtsanwalt. Er ist seit über 30 Jahren an der Speerspitze des Themas Patientensicherheit in den Vereinigten Staaten. Er hat multiple Veröffentlichungen, auch zuletzt im New England Journal of Medicine zum Thema Covid-Pandemie und CANDOR. Care for Caregivers. Er ist an der Universität in Chicago unterwegs und hat an sehr vielen Stellen sehr viele Preise auch für sein Tun entsprechend getan. In über 500 Krankenhäusern erfolgreich das Verfahren eingeführt, über das wir gleich informiert werden und darüber reden können. Und es ist mir eine Freude, dass sich Tim hier zu nächtlicher Zeit in Chicago dann bereit erklärt hat, das entsprechend vorzustellen. Tim ist einer von denjenigen, die man sehr gerne als Kollegen oder auch als Chef haben wollte, weil sie nicht nur klug sind und empathisch und erfahren, sondern auch entsprechend ansprechbar. Hi, Tim. I just have made a short introduction about you and your career or what you've done according to patient safety. And we are quite honored and glad that we have you here in this online conference, which is somehow also recorded for the afterworld. And we are really looking forward to your presentation and to the discussion afterwards. So, Tim, the floor is yours.
Oh, Günther, thank you so much. And it's an honor to be with you and with those who have joined us today to talk about something that I'm very, very passionate about. As I was listening to you mention, I am a pediatrician, anesthesiologist, and attorney who got involved in patient safety because of my own experiences at the University of Illinois, taking care of patients who we hurt, we harmed from medical error, and we were not open and honest with them. And I suffered as an anesthesiologist because of that. I know many of my colleagues did. And so about 20 years ago, we started down this path of what we refer to as the compassionate approach. I have worked as the Chief Patient Safety and Risk Officer at University of Illinois, did a lot of work in the area of improving the way we respond to harm in a more compassionate way. And then about a year ago, joined RLDatix, which is the patient safety software company. And as we begin to think about how do we hardwire some of what I'm going to talk to you about briefly here into software to drive high reliability in that. So if we could go to next, you'll see a little bit here where we are as a company, RLDatix. We are in over 19 countries now. For 30 years, we've been involved in providing solutions to organizations around the world with over 5,000 areas where we have implemented our software around the world. And again, with the focus of it being really taking the information we're able to get from within the organization to learn from it and to try to make sure we're responding appropriately and trying to improve in the best way we can. And so with next, what you're going to hear me speak to a bit here is connecting the heart with the head. You know, we often, when you see the patient safety statistics, we often think of the number who die from preventable harm, the number of medication errors, but behind every one of them is a person and a family, but also a clinician who may be suffering from the after effect of having been involved in a harm event, whether it's a mistake or not. And the goal is to talk about how there is a way to build a comprehensive approach to harm that really is done in a compassionate way that helps everybody heal and helps us get safer in terms of doing that. And so when you look at these is where the numbers were, right? To err is human, and which talks about all the preventable harm that's in healthcare, but balanced with that many, many publications about the unfortunate wall of silence that goes up when harm happens between us and our patients, as well as between us as clinicians, myself as an anesthesiologist and the surgeon. We wouldn't often talk about what it is that had happened. And so with that, we've recognized now that creates, in the next that you're going to see, a terrible collateral wall of silence, this unkind acts cascade, where on the left side, you can see that the torment that it delivers to patients and families, but also to members of the care team. And that we've learned more and more that when the care team is harmed, they can't provide safe care. And that has really become clear during COVID, that is a significant issue. And with the next, what you'll recognize is that we began to see that no matter what we tried to put into place as a safety strategy, we were failing because we weren't addressing the culture issues. And we needed a better way through empathy and compassion to change the culture and to create a just culture so that we could create that milieu in which people could work and feel psychologically safe so they could provide safe care to patients. And with the next, what you will see is we decided over the course of many years to develop a comprehensive, principled, and systematic approach to harm. And very early on, we began to see with this approach, we saw lots of improvement, reduction in liability, significant reduction in safety events, improved staff engagement. And it caught the eye of the Obama administration at the time, and it now has the eye of the Biden administration, because there was a recognition that this actually works. And just showing that flow diagram on the right, you can see it begins with your ability to identify these harm events so you can activate your system rapidly. And then up there in number 3 at the top with response and communication, that's 2 kinds of response and communication. It is responding to patients and families, but really, really importantly, caring for the caregiver, making sure that we are providing emotional first aid to the caregivers involved in this. And of course, in the bottom part, you can see with the number 4, that's where we begin our human factors-based event analysis. So as we learn more, we share it with patients and families and members of the care team. And then ultimately, we come to a resolution, which is our commitment to these families that we will make sure we do what we can to prevent these in the future. Again, the data became very clear, and this is the reason why we got funding to create what became known as the CANDOR Toolkit that's been out since about 2016. And we've actually had the opportunity to implement in many different areas, in many different environments, this CANDOR approach, over 500 hospitals, in fact, that we are working with now to begin to move this. Next. So one of the other parts that became known around this is from the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, both nationally and internationally, that these are solutions that work, and they are focused on changing the culture, creating a safety culture, and getting organizational buy-in and transparency. But critical to all this is caring for the caregiver. If our doctors, if our nurses, if they do not feel cared for and psychologically safe, they're not able to deliver safe care to patients. There's a phrase that's beginning to be used more and more now, which is the patient comes second. And we have to focus on the health workers. And that became clear also on World Patient Safety Day in September last year, where the World Health Organization came out with their safety culture, speaking again to the power and the importance of providing mental well-being, stress management, and this peer support that I'll talk about in more detail in a little bit to our caregivers. And with next, what you'll see is as we move this forward, we also began to realize that there is software that can help drive all of what I mentioned to you. It can really look at and capture these harm events in a way where you can respond empathically to patients and families, but also caregivers, but then really look at your data, look at your policies, look at your procedures, look at the human factors that have gone into these events, and then track what you're doing to try to improve, to look and see how often are we having the same event happen over and over again and not really changing it, making sure we're capturing the input from patients and families and understanding it. And that is the flow of looking at what we refer to as applied safety intelligence. It's this use of software, this use of technology to help us understand with big data and little data how we can get better and use the software to track what are we doing to improve. Moving forward again with this, we will see that this is a paradigm shift. As we work our way through this, you will see that we need to move of reporting from delayed to immediate, and that communication needs to move from delay, deny, and defend to immediate, ongoing, and critically empathic. And on the event review side, trying to stay away from the shame, blame, and train to really understanding through the human factors, how do we do process redesign? And caring for the caregiver. This is the thing I'm most passionate about. I wished I'd had it particularly as an anesthesiologist, and a lot of the harm that I saw and events I was involved in where I knew there were preventable things that had happened. Moving from people like me and others suffering in isolation to receiving immediate, ongoing, and empathic support. And then finally, if it turns out we know our care is bad, how do we resolve those issues with patients and families, not having to rely on a very expensive, very inefficient legal system where we basically bury our errors and bury our mistakes and fail to learn from them. And so when it comes to care for the caregiver and moving on next, one of the things that we've created as part of this is this need to recognize the impact of COVID-19 on our doctors, on our nurses, on everybody who's gone through this in a way where we think about doing this proactively, where we're not relying on them to reach out to employee assistants or to a psychologist. We're bringing proactively this support to the members of the healthcare worker team in order to do this. And with next, you'll see that we are able to provide this first aid. It means proactively reaching out, having systems built into the organization where you are able to comfort a peer, listen to them, assess their emotional needs, and help connect them. Because sometimes we often view reaching out as a sign of weakness, making sure we connect them with the kind of support they need so that we can maintain their mental health. And more importantly, and we have seen this throughout this pandemic, recognize when do we have people that actually are in such dire straits, they need to be referred, where they may be potentially suicidal or ready to leave the profession completely related to that. And so what you're going to see is one of the ways that we teach and train and provide organizations with the tools to provide this peer support is we use reenactment of real cases that we are aware of that demonstrate how to do this. And we do it through very interactive workshops with some fantastic actors that we use. And here's just an example that I'm going to share with you with this. And that is, there was a story of a physician who was involved in caring for a colleague who died from COVID-19. This physician actually had to put the breathing tube in their doctor colleague who worked in the emergency department. And it was clear he was suffering from what it is that had happened. And he'd had a couple of visits from a peer just checking in and seeing how he was doing. And what you're going to see now in this video is a follow-up visit after a couple of these peer support interventions where there's just checking in and seeing how they're doing. And we're going to show this video to you. We have added German subtitles so you can look and see how this conversation is going and how this peer supporter is trained to recognize what is going on and make sure that their colleague gets the support that they need. So if you want to go ahead and play the video now as we move forward, this will be an opportunity to reflect and look on this. And then Günther, after we show this, I'm going to ask you to come on and we can begin to have a deeper conversation with those who attended this.
Hey, James. Hey. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me.
Yeah, no problem.
You know, I know we spoke a couple of weeks ago, and I really appreciate that you took the time to do that. It's been a couple weeks, and I just wanted to check in and see how you were doing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you coming by. I'm not doing too well, I suppose, is the best sort of way to put it.
Yeah. Sounds like you've been having a pretty tough time.
It's been about a couple of the worst weeks I can remember, to be honest with you. It's just been just so many things.
I'm really sorry to hear that. That's tough. Have you been eating? been getting enough sleep?
No, I don't think I've slept in days at least. I just keep getting these horrible night terrors that, you know, I keep dreaming that I'm intubating Scott, and the virus just, it's almost like a fog of virus just comes from him and just it's sort of like attacking me, and it's just relentless, and it's just over and over and over again, and it just it's terrifying, I have to be honest with you. And then I'm back up, but I meant to come in here.
How's it been coming here?
Not good. I just seeing the emergency department door, you know, it's just like my heart just starts pounding. It's just like it's almost like it's going to come out my chest. It's just any time I'm about to get close, and then I'm in, you know, I have to go in and work in this hospital, and it's just I can even just feel it now. It's not pleasant.
It sounds like you're not sleeping well. You're having these night terrors. When you do come to work, you're not feeling rested, and work's triggering its own, you know, emotional reaction. I mean, that sounds like some pretty tough stuff you're dealing with.
Yeah, it is.
Is there anyone you could talk to about it? If, you know, I'm so glad you've been willing to have these dialogues, and I want to continue it. But is there anyone at home you've been able to speak with?
I just keep arguing with my wife. I don't know why, but she's done nothing wrong. She's just been trying to support me, but we just keep fighting, and so no, I haven't. And it's just it's hard.
I'm sorry to hear that. That's tough. I mean, it's very clear from what you're saying that you're going through it, and that makes sense. I mean, what you went through is tough stuff to handle, and we know how good you are at your job here. I mean, we deeply care for you, and we know how much you deeply care for your patients.
Thank you.
Nothing you're saying doesn't make sense to the rest of us. I hope you know that. You're not alone. If you don't mind me asking, you know, now let's say 1 is a feeling of hopelessness, and 10 is hopeful. Where are you sitting at the moment?
I don't know, maybe like a 3.
Okay, a 3. So, is there something you think you could put in place or act upon that would maybe help you inch up the scale a bit?
I don't know, really. I think I might need some help in that department, to be honest with you, because it's difficult for me to see how I can move forward. I've keep arguing with my wife. Usually she would be the person I would talk about this stuff, but I think just the sleep and the nightmares and coming back here and everything is just it's all sort of coming together, and I don't know how I can get help. I think I probably need some help.
I think that's a great idea, and I think these are the things that are kind of hard to realize. And if you, building on that, if you don't mind, I have someone that you could speak with, and I'd love to continue our dialogue. But I'm sure I could set you up with someone to speak with that could really help you out, and you know, put some things in place for you to get a little bit closer to feeling whole. you know?
I do, yeah, and I appreciate that, and I'm definitely willing to give that a go because I need to be back at it, you know. There's plenty of people for me to help, and I can't be helping people from like this.
Just a couple of slides here highlighting, Günther, the criticality of this, right? The long hours, the high stress. It's really, really devastating. The number that really sticks out to me, and I had over the course of my 35 years practicing medicine, have had colleagues attempt suicide, and that a quarter of us know someone who's either completed a suicide or attempted it. And with the next slide, you'll see, and the dollars associated with this are just huge in terms of what we're seeing out there. But we now, the recent data shows 85% of physicians in North America now are experiencing burnout. It's just a massive, massive number. And I think it's really critical that we begin to focus on this and use some of these solutions to try to make a difference if we can. And I was thinking with that, we could go ahead and probably stop sharing slides and just, have a conversation, Günther.
Yep. So thank you very much, Tim, for your presentation and the case in the worst case scenario. And what we've already seen now is that RLDatix is working on at least 3 different dimensions. So you work very an individual level when, in the worst case, you take care of the caregiver that they will not step out or commit suicide. On the other side, generally, you are collecting lots of data through the RLDatix software. And the third dimension, of course, is also sort of training of the leaders and the caregivers in advance, how to communicate, how to interact with patients and their relatives. And may I just ask you how you educate or how you train a hospital once it asks you to start with the RLDatix portfolio, including CANDOR?
Sure. Well, the model we sort of take with this is kind of like aviation and what would be called, Günther, a go team, which is it's a small group of people who are well-trained in providing empathic communication, who are available when these tragedies happen to be able to help coach you, have conversations with patients and families, but also provide peer support. There are volunteers who go through the training, doctors and nurses and others who become part of this team. We use the video-based training. We also use live actors when we do the training. And we're capable of doing this in almost any country. We have actors who speak all different languages who can help us begin to do this. And you do it in these workshops with experiential learning and a wide variety of cases. So you're building out a relatively small group of volunteers who are available to provide this peer support. At one of our hospitals, the amount of time commitment from somebody providing peer support or care for the caregiver, it was only about 2 hours a year. Each of these interventions, as you could see there, that was about an 8-minute conversation. Most of the conversations are about 30 minutes. So what you ask for is that people get trained to be available for maybe 4 sessions throughout the course of a year, and you are able to provide it in these serious circumstances. And then we also use the actors to portray patients and families to where you practice a wide variety of opportunities to communicate to them. And then finally, just like with aviation, you have this small group of safety science experts who can respond when these harm events occur to really understand what happened and put things in place to make sure it doesn't happen in the future. And then once you have these people trained, you just use periodic, very short workshops to keep them up on their skills and what they're able to do with that.
So how long does it take to train a hospital or maybe even smaller department?
Well, on the communication side, we just did a study showing it's about 6 hours of empathy and compassion training that an individual needs to be able to go through this. And then often what we'll do is use 1 or 2 hours for the whole organization, just so they realize we are changing our approach. We're changing what it is that we're doing when we do this. Just 6 hours of training, we've shown you can statistically significantly change the empathic behavior of people, Günther, as well as their ability to provide empathic messages.
Thank you. Yeah. And one more question according to your software, because digitalization is a keyword also in Germany. Some people are absolutely fond of it. Other ones say, oh God, please stay away from me. So how does collecting data and your artificial safety intelligence support the work of the caregivers and also the work of the hospital leaders?
That's a great question. So one of the things we're able to do, even with natural language processing, is when the event reports come in, you can analyze those reports, Günther, and identify someone who needs first aid, just based on what it is that you're seeing in the event report. And then with harm events to patients and families, you're able to track whether or not you've reached out and had a conversation with that patient or family member. And if you haven't, you get a prompt to make sure that somebody is going in there and having the conversation. And you can also track how long has it been since the harm event until we've communicated to the family. We know the closer you get that to within 2 hours of the harm event, the more likely you are to maintain trust and mitigate the legal issues. When it comes to the applied safety intelligence and harm events, there is a lot of work now being done, Günther, looking at near misses, not just harm events, but near misses and unsafe conditions to identify where the next harm event may be before it actually happens. So people reporting that the wrong medication was delivered to the unit of the floor, and you begin to see patterns of that, patterns of these things happening. The same way in the intensive care unit, there are ways you can look at monitors and delays in people responding to monitors, where in a particular unit, in a particular time because of distractions, that's an area you need to focus on, again, to prevent this from happening again. You can't do that with pencil and paper. You have to have a lot of this data to go into it. Here's the other part, which is fantastic with the software. Let's say, for example, you have a device malfunction. The software allows you to then to go into and look and see your data around the instructions for use to make sure that you're actually using the monitor appropriately. And in doing that, you often identify it hasn't been maintained properly or been used that way. So that's just some of the ways that the software can drive high reliability and allowing you to track the data to see how effective you're doing.
Okay, yeah. Do you have any experiences now in the actual pandemic with lots of pressure on all healthcare stuff, whether CANDOR is especially helpful?
So a lot of the data comes now from a couple of places. One is there's a lot of work being done by Brian Sexton at Duke, and Alan Frankel, who does do a lot of work internationally with his group called Safe and Reliable, that the one thing that does help with burnout right now is the implementation of this peer support program in organizations, where the individual doc or the individual nurse has one of those brief conversations like you saw in the video. It is one of the things that when they reflect back on it, they're more likely to stay in their current job. They're less likely to leave, and they're more likely in a survey to put out, respond that I believe my organization cares about me. And that is what we've been able to show in the pandemic. We also know at the University of California, San Diego, they have a very robust program on suicide prevention. They do believe, based on their data, that they are saving lives in the organizations that they've helped implement this, related to that. So that's some of the data that we have now you know, for sure related to the very specific stuff I know you're passionate about, which is the care for the caregiver.
One more question about the rapid response teams in the worst case. So how many extra staff do you need in a hospital to provide this service?
Well, on the safety science side, you actually only need a couple because these events are rare enough that you're able to do that. And here's another thing we're finding to work, Günther, and I don't know, you'd have to let me know if this would be possible in Germany. We've been able to create regional go teams. So you may have in one geographic area, say a large county or 3 or 4 cities together, where you might have a team of 4 or 5 safety experts who come together from different hospitals that are available when these events happen to be able to be deployed and go to that single organization, which creates a really efficient way to be able to do it. Because that's what the National Transportation Safety Board does when there's a plane crash. These people have their regular jobs. They're doing what they're doing. When there's the event, they're able to deploy out there. And in the lives of the patients, as well as the caregivers, this is like a plane crash in their lives to do that. And so we know that system has worked reasonably well.
Okay. There is quite a new poll in Germany where younger hospital doctors were asked how satisfied they were with their working conditions. And at least 1/3 gave the answer that they are deeply dissatisfied with the working conditions and that they are thinking of stepping out of their job. We have a similar poll with intensive care nurses, where also 1/3 of all answering healthcare nurses said that they would just finish the actual pandemia and afterwards they would quit their job. And I think at least Germany, maybe all other countries, will drive into a real lack of medical and nursery staff. Is CANDOR and everything around it helpful to prevent this?
Well, the data would suggest it. You know, there's a lot of work was done by Paul O'Neill, who was part of the National Patient Safety Foundation. He ran, prior to getting into healthcare, one of the largest organizations in the world called Alcoa. It was an aluminum manufacturing company. He worked with a couple of in fact, administrations, Bush as well as Clinton. And his data, which is held up in healthcare, is if your staff can answer yes to the following 3 questions, they are more likely to stay engaged and be satisfied with their job. Number 1 is, do I feel respected by everybody in the organization? And right now within the pandemic, too many people feel like their opinions are not respected. They're not being listened to, and we're not paying attention to that. And that disrespect is leading to them feeling as if they want to get out and get another job. The other one is, am I thanked when I really go above and beyond to provide the kind of care that I do? Am I really appreciated? Are people really reaching out and letting me know? And the final one is, the big one is, am I given the resources to provide the kind of care that I need to be able to provide? So that means having the appropriate personal protective equipment, the other kinds of things, and that you do have reasonable staffing so that people are able to take care of their patients in a way where they're not overly burdened doing that. If leaders can create that in their organization, then you will, again, the data shows, have a very highly engaged staff. You'll have less turnover and greater retention. And the peer support programs, Günther, have been shown that when you put those in place, people do feel respected and they do feel appreciated for their job. And that is why a very relatively simple solution is helping many of these organizations and systems.
You, over the last few months, you got some insights into the German healthcare system and hospital organization. So what do you think Germany has to do to learn from your experiences worldwide? I am just following the funny and might be simple idea as a trained surgeon that when it works somewhere else in 19 countries, there must be a way to make it also work in Germany. And what would you propose how to start in Germany?
Well, and this goes back to the work we did in North America, right? So we had this idea 15 to 16 years ago. It really piqued the interest of President Obama because he was seeing it work in a small area. We were working in Chicago, and through support of President Obama, he said, I believe in this, but we need to study it and pilot it outside of the ivory tower of academia in some of these other hospitals. And so we know that this kind of pilot work can be a great way to think about how do you implement it in a different culture, in a different part of the country, in a different way it's done. So what I've learned over the last couple months has been, if we can find an organization whose leaders are highly committed to doing this, we would go in there in sort of a systematic way, Günther, help apply it to that organization in that culture. So that would include this deep dive gap analysis with people from outside Germany and inside Germany to really understand the organization and all these elements of, do we understand when harm happens? How do we respond to it? Where are the opportunities to do it? Well, we would say, what are the gaps? And it will be very different in Germany than say in France or in Canada or in the US. We can't assume it's the same way every way. But what you can then do is, as you look and see those gaps, begin to identify, how do we fill the gaps? And then use this, that it is a proven methodology around the world, this empathy and compassion training. How do we now do the training and build these teams that fit in within the particular, organizations, health system, hospital in Germany? And as you learn from that, Günther, then you can start to spread it like we did. We started with 10 hospitals, and now we're in over 500. And shortly, we hope to be in 1,500 hospitals, because with the lessons learned, it's like that, plan, do, study, act, small bits of change, and then you move it forward. But you need champions in Germany. We need to have partners there who understand this, they're passionate about it, so it can be done the German way, not the Tim McDonald Chicago way.
Okay, so we will find someone who will be on the front line and the champion in Germany. But two keywords I would like to pick up. First, leadership. So you need the leaders of a hospital, of course, to start with it. So how to address the leaders in the right way, especially from the background that the English-speaking countries are living in the so-called evidence belt, where the German-speaking countries are traditionally more in the eminence belt. So I'm the head of the department, I'm king of the universe. So this sometimes makes a little bit different, but maybe you already have some ideas and tricks how to convince leaders to start with this patient safety activities. And the second thing is, you of course start with the gap analysis. When you start with the gap analysis, it's very difficult because of course you find gaps. And when there's an atmosphere or a culture of fear and distrust, this might be one of the factors where hospitals say, I'm afraid to start with it.
That's a broad question. There's a lot packed in there, but let me share with you what we've learned. At the highest level, and as you know, I helped open a hospital in the Middle East, in Doha, Qatar. And part of the work I was doing there even is working with the highest levels of government to help even the government agencies realize they need to move away from this punitive approach. Because if they take the punitive approach, you're right, people will bury their errors and their mistakes. So it's got to start at the highest level of the regulators that are over that to begin to do it. But for the leader of an organization, let's say a CEO of a hospital, the way that it's worked for us was the third slide. You got to connect the heart with the head. So you need the stories from the patients and families who experienced the wall of silence, and you need the stories from the doctors and nurses who suffered from the wall of silence and the lack of a care for the caregiver to appeal to the heart of the CEO. But then you need the head, you need the data. And the reason that I have been so fanatical about collecting data is to be able to come back to the CEOs who want to do the right thing, to show them it is the smart thing to do, not just the right thing to do financially. That's what we need. And then the other key ingredient is identify a CEO with courage, because it takes courage to make this kind of change. Just like you said, Günther, you know, it took courage for me to openly admit to a patient and family we made a mistake that hurt them. Everybody was afraid that it would turn into this horrible Armageddon, and it didn't. It had the opposite effect in the culture of the organization. And so that's how you can get in there and begin to appeal. And then what happens is that CEO shares their successes with another CEO, and now you're beginning to see a movement. You're beginning to see a real change in this. And it took us a lot of years, Günther, to get to this initially, but then once it caught fire, that fire of improvement really started to go and to spread.
So one more question about the portfolio of RLDatix, how flexible it is. So is it a one size fits all for every country, or are there possibilities to adjust it according how many data from where and what do we have to collect, and how we shall adjust the trainings?
Well, I mean, it's very, very adjustable depending on the area, the location, and even the country, because again, we are in 19 countries. The other thing is, I mean, just to share with you, it can be adapted to a very large academic hospital that does a lot of complex surgery. But we've also adapted it to what we refer to in North America as senior living, you know, the nursing homes that don't have a lot of, or have almost no procedures going on, where you really need to adjust the software to match the clinical milieu and the kind of people there. In hospitals, you have nurses, you have doctors who are very sophisticated, who can understand and put in the report. In a nursing home, you don't. You may have only nursing assistants, and so you can adapt it to that. And of course, the ability to adjust language is something where it's easily configurable there. So what happens is the software, once a decision is to move that way, is to work with the people locally and adapt it locally so it meets their needs. It's not us telling you how to use the software. It's you telling us how best can you take advantage of all these different benefits and solutions that we have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tim. I just asked to the audience, switching to German, gibt's von eurer Seite dazu Anmerkungen, Kommentare? Ich kann mir gut vorstellen, dass der einen oder anderen schon ein bisschen was auf der Zunge liegt und möchte euch jetzt ein bisschen ermutigen, euch da vielleicht mit hineinzubegeben in die Diskussion. Freundliche Zurückhaltung, ja, dann mache ich nochmal weiter. So, which was the last country that you stepped into with RLDatix?
I'm trying to think again of the most recent one. We've really moved forward in Australia, and there's also a lot of new software products, for example, have even been moved into Wales, where there's this whole resolution solution, which takes it from the event all the way through resolution, and they've been able to put that into place. And there's also a region in Canada where very recently they have finished the development of some product and they've moved it in there. Some of the areas where there's been a lot of interest in this as well is in Saudi Arabia. A lot of work building it out, you know, in the Middle East to adapt it to that particular environment as well. And then we have a lot of other interest in other countries right now, but the implementation hasn't actually happened. But those are some of the most recent ones, Günther, where we have moved into it.
Yeah. I have one question from Dr. Carla Witsch. What idea of the software she shall have? Is it a sort of critical incident reporting system, or is it more? So you made people curious about how the software looks like. Yeah.
Oh, well, it's way beyond critical incident reporting. And this is another thing we have identified. And let me just ask you this question first, Günther, and I'll move into it. Are there issues of unprofessional behavior from doctors or nurses in Germany as an issue? Mm-hmm. There are. Well, so one of the things that the software encourages people to do is when they observe unprofessional behavior, to put those reports into this event reporting system. You can then use natural language processing to identify the kind of unprofessionalism and then collect the data together. And here's what we found. In units where staff are reporting unprofessional behavior, those are the ones where you're more likely going to see your next critical incident. And it's really powerful data that we're able to mine and give feedback to the leaders in the organizations, Günther, to let them know, just based on this kind of information, what it is that's happening. The other way that this works is as people put in these various reports, you identify our computer order entry of medications has not been designed properly. And we now need to redesign it. And again, that is not based on an actual real serious harm event. It's based on analyzing these data of near misses that people have put into the event reporting system.
Okay.
So lots of different ways the applied safety intelligence can help, way beyond this idea of critical incidents.
Yeah. I don't know whether Polly can hear me. There are some complaints that the microphones of the participants are out. So is there a possibility to switch on the microphone function of our participants? We can go into the last 3 or 4 minutes into a direct dialogue and maybe also for the talk afterwards.
Hi, Günther. Unfortunately, with Zoom webinar, attendees aren't able to speak, but obviously we encourage them to send questions via the Q&A.
Okay, so I learned a little bit more. So maybe we should put it in the Zoom critical incident report list then. So no microphone function. Unfortunately, I do not understand why it is, but I'm not the generation IT. So question and answers, please. We are the question and answers session in the written form. Yeah. But as we actually only have 3 minutes left and no actual questions, let me just already thank you, Tim, for your presentation and discussion, and most of all for your mission you are following to promote patient safety as a win-win situation, good for patients, good for caregivers, and also, of course, good for the system. And I really appreciate the approach with not only addressing numbers. I've learned myself that maybe even more numbers might be really helpful for better safety, but with care for the caregivers, addressing heads and hearts, it's for Germany a new approach, taking care of people. We're spending a lots of money and maybe too much money for things, and we are not spending enough money for human beings in the system. And if on the political level, that's my job as a former politician, if we can change it, that we do not spend so much money for high prices technology and more money into humans and what they need to provide better care, we all might be better off with less money for better care. So that's at least an illusion or an idea, and I'm still trying to follow this idea. So if you want some final remarks, so we have one more question. Let's see. Yeah. Thank you. I would like to get more information on RLDatix. So RLDatix.com is the homepage, and you will find at least my email address somewhere. You can address me directly to get more information. info@rldatics.com. You know, the thing is, also once again in German, hier gibt es die Möglichkeit, tatsächlich Patientensicherheit im Krankenhaus auf der systematischen Ebene sehr erfolgreich zu implementieren. In 19 Ländern funktioniert das, zum Teil seit 20 Jahren. Warum auch nicht in Deutschland? Dass der Weg in Deutschland ein bisschen schwieriger ist als in anderen Ländern, ist auch klar. Amerikanisches Gesundheitswesen kann leicht investieren in solche Bereiche. Die Briten können im staatlichen System leicht investieren. Die deutschen Krankenhäuser sind alle sehr eng gestrickt. Da sind die Möglichkeiten, da proaktiv loszugehen, eher begrenzt. Das soll uns aber in unserem Elan idealerweise nicht aufhalten, entsprechend zu agieren. Ja. Okay.
The only final thing I would say, Günther, is thank you to you. As I mentioned earlier, it's been wonderful getting a chance to meet you. As you know, we've talked about, I have had both of my COVID vaccinations. And when the time comes when we're able to travel internationally again, I would love to come to Germany and meet and talk to potential people who may be interested in this. So together we can change, hearts and minds related to this. Because I think if we have a chance to share some of these stories, I think we could do some great things together. And so thank you for the opportunity and your curiosity in what we're doing.
Thank you very much. So we stay in contact and we will never give up. Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks very much.